Hello, my name is Pierre Sabak. Today I'm going to be talking about the dragon in relationship to the religious scriptures. From my previous interviews, I've talked about how the serpent is a personification of the fallen angel. And we're going to actually examine this tradition that the serpent itself is a purveyor of knowledge or wisdom. So, going back into some of the ancient etymologies, if we look at the Arabic word ifrit, ifrit is a type of infernal jinn. The word ifrit comes from the Arabic verbal root fritar, which is to deceive. So the jinn itself is represented as a deceiver. Now, very importantly and significantly, ifrit is punned in the Hebrew language with ivrit, spelt I-V-R-I-T. Ivrit is the Hebrew language. So here it's very important to emphasize that the Hebrew scriptures themselves are interpreted as being duplicitous. In other words, the scriptures themselves are veiled. They are written in esoteric language. The occult traditions found within the Quran also express the same idea as well. So, in Arabic, for example, we have the word wuju al-Quran. Wuju means forgotten. So, wuju al-Quran is the forgotten recitation. Now, wuju is a homonym. It also has the additional meaning of a facet or directions. So, the Quran, or the facet of the Quran, is esoteric. In other words, the Quran is written in nuanced and very layered language. These same kind of wordplays are found also within Egyptian Arabic as well. So we find, for example, with the Talmud, the word Talmud is punned with taban, which is a serpent in the Arabic, taliba, which is a student. So, for example, we get the word Taliban, which is a student, but literally is interpreted as an initiate of the Talmud. And these wordplays keep on replicating. So, for example, within the oral traditions of Judaism, for example, we see the Kabbalah. The word Kabbalah comes from the Arabic word kab, which is a coil, and kaba, which is to conceal. Now, the Old Semitic word for a serpent is keb, and is punned with kaba, which is a messenger. Now, the messenger, of course, is a symbol of the angel, Greek angelos, an angel. So, again, we see within the oral traditions that the Kabbalah is is written in veiled language. It is written in esoteric language, and is intrinsically correlated with the serpent, Keb, and Kaba, a messenger. So the angel or the angelic messenger is deemed or is characterized as serpentine. And this is very important because the serpent itself is a conveyor of religious knowledge. So when we look at, for example, the Greek word skolex, which is a worm, we see that there is an etymological relationship with the word scholar. This is in English where we would get the word school from. So the serpent itself is a conveyor of knowledge. Now, within the Greek mysteries, we see this relationship with the philosophers. The word philosopher, philo, which means to love, also can refer to a brotherly love as well, and sopher as well, which is knowledge. So, a lover of knowledge. Now, the philosophers were brothers of wisdom, because philo can also be used esoterically to denote a brother. So, philosopher is a lover or a brother of knowledge. But we see within the Greek mysteries that philo office is a pun. Philo office is a brother of the serpent. So the lovers of wisdom and knowledge, this knowledge is conveyed through the serpent. As I argued earlier, the serpent itself is a manifestation or a materialization of an angel. So this is angelic knowledge. But we see also the same word plays within the Arabic as well. So, for example, ak is a brother and is punned with hak, which is truth. And this, of course, appertains to the Babylonian word akan, which is a seraph or a uraeus. So the flaming seraph is rendered as akan. So, just to summarise, both within the Greek traditions of the philosophers, but also within the Arabic and Hebrew, or the Semitic traditions, we see that the serpent is a conveyor of knowledge, that this knowledge is often duplicitous, it is layered in veiled language, and is identified with esoteric knowledge. Now, this knowledge in particular is linked to the bloodline of the king. And I think it's useful here to talk about the relationship between the king or the royal bloodlines and the angelic or noble bloodlines. So I think what we'll do is we'll look at some word relationships. So, Malak, a king, is a pun on Malak, a sailor, because as I've argued within my book, The Murder of Reality, Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon, the angel personifies the sailor. So, for example, the angelic host of Sabaoth is a word which is rendered from the Hebrew word sevet, which means a crew member. So, the angel itself is a sailor. So we see there's a relationship between Malak, an angel, and Melech, a king. In English, we would translate this as kingship. But we see similar relationships as well. So, for example, Sarif, a noble, is punned with Safina, Safina, a ship, within the Arabic language. Now, Safina, a boat, is another reference to lordship, because the Sarif, a noble, is identified with the ship, in English, lordship. But the same wordplays and the same puns are found also within the Greek. Thanos, which is a noble, is punned or is identified with the suffix nous, which is the Greek word for a ship. So, just to summarise, obviously there's a relationship within the Hebrew word malak, an angel, malak, a sailor, and melech, a king, which we said within English would translate as kingship, and this relationship within the Arabic with sarif, which is a noble, and safina, a boat, which can equally be rendered in the English language as lordship. But we see these same wordplays also replicating within the Greek language also. So, for example, in the Greek, thanos, a noble, the suffix nous, which is a boat, obviously is a symbol which is used to denote the angelic bloodline within the Greek. So thanos literally would be translated as lordship. But the same wordplays are found variously. If we remember also, the Canaanite word Baal, which means Lord, is a pun on Baha, which is a sailor, the Arabic word for a sailor. So Baal himself is depicted as a lordship. Same wordplays are found also within the English as well. We see that there's a relationship between the word see and sir. See obviously is a homonym to look, which is a symbol of the dragon, can be symbolized with the eye. So in Greek, drakos, which is an eye, and drakon, a dragon. But also, sea is a homonym of the sea. So here we are referring to an angelic navigator. And this is actually very important because the government itself is symbolized, or is a symbol of the angelic bloodline. But going further into different languages, we can see that in the Hebrew language, Nasi is a prince and is punned with Nasi, which is a fish. So the bloodline of the king can be interpreted to be linked to the reptile. And the reptile itself is a signifier of the dragon, or which can be interpreted to be aligned to the angel. But there are more wordplays also. If we also look within the Chinese language, Yu is a homonym. Yu means a prince, but can also be rendered as a fish within the Chinese language. And indeed, when we look at the Japanese emperors as well, the Japanese imperial lineage is traced from Ryujin. Now, Ryujin is translated in English as a dragon man, literally a dragon man. So the lineage of the Japanese emperors, as found within the Hebrew and within the Arabic ciphers, is connected to the bloodline of the serpent. The serpent itself, a symbol of the dragon or the angel. Within the Welsh traditions, the Pendragon refers to the leader or to a ruler. Now, the relationship between the king and the serpent is documented variously within many different classical languages. And so it's useful here just to draw allusion to some of these etymologies. So when we look at the Greek word basilikos, a serpent, that is punned with basilios, which is the adjective for royal. So the king is personified as the serpent, but there are more word plays. Mal, which is the Persian word for a ruler or a leader, is taken from the Persian word ma, which is a serpent. The word mar in Arabic refers to a saint. So instantly we're seeing a relationship here between the bloodline of the serpent, the bloodline of the king, and the relationship etymologically between the saints, which is important. Going back into the Arabic language, Akim, which is a sovereign, a king or a ruler, is punned with the Babylonian word Akan, a seraph. Within the Greek traditions, we see the hemithioi, which literally translates as a demigod, is punned with the word helmintheos, which is a worm. The same relationships are found also within the Greek word Dioscorus, which is a son of God, and Diosaurus, which is a reptile god. So the relationship between the king and the demigods and the bloodline of the saints are found within the classical languages. The point which I want to make with the angel, and I think that this is important, is that the angel is a conveyor of religious scriptures. I made this point earlier, but I think here it's useful for us to look at some etymologies. So, for example, the rabbinical scholars trace the word malach, which is translated from the Hebrew word meaning an angel, from the verbal root amar. Now, amar is the homonym. It has two meanings. It means either to command or to speak, and we've got the additional meaning to build. So the angels themselves are represented as either talkers, but they are also depicted as builders. Now, the idea of the builder is very important when we actually look at Messianic symbols, because the Messianic fraternity are the protectorate of the royal or the angelic bloodline. So, Amar, which is to talk or speak or command, is linked to the builder, Amar, which is to build. But we see that there's also a relationship with the sailor, and this is very important. The word Amara, which is a fleet in the Hebrew language, appertains, as we said, to the angelic sailors. So, for example, the Hebrew word malach, which is an angel, is identified with malach, a sailor. But going into the Greek languages, also we see this relationship between the angel and the talker. So, for example, the Greek word poneria, which is the angelic host, is connected both to the word fein, which is a serpent or a spirit, but is also linked to the Greek word phonin, which is to talk or to speak. So the angels themselves are talkers. We said earlier that this is linked both in terms of language, and the angels being the architect of language, but also to the fact that the angels are the conveyor of religious knowledge. So the angel himself is a talker. It's useful here to look at the symbol of the ship as well in terms of governance, and this is a very important idea which I make reference to in my writings and in my speeches as well. So, just to go over some of the common points, Malach is an angel, Malach is a sailor, Melech is a king. Now, going into the Greek etymologies, the word government comes from gubernatio, which is to steer or navigate. So the governments are represented with ship iconography. In English, we would refer to this as statecraft. So the symbol of government can be represented with the ship, and indeed when one goes into court, you will often see that the judge himself is using maritime law, because the maritime law is another signifier of both the government but also the law or the angelic law. Now, in the Hebrew and the Arabic also, we see this relationship between governance and the angelic bloodline. So, for example, the Hebrew word shilton, which means government, is taken from or deduced from the Semitic etymology shaitan, which is Satan. Okay, to conclude our discussion on the angels in relationship to statecraft, which is a signifier of the boat, we see that there are similarities between the Latin word gubernatio, which is to steer a boat, coming from the Greek kubernao. The government itself, or statecraft, can be represented by the boat. As we've talked about in this section of the talk, the Hebrew word malach, which is an angel, is a pun on the word malach, which is a sailor, and melech, which is a king. Hence in English we would get the word kingship. We can also see that the idea of the boat is encoded within languages as well. So for example, the Hebrew word shilton, which is government, is taken from the word shaitan, which would be rendered into English as Satan. So, for example, the governments are bipartisan and is adversarial. In other words, they encode the shaitanic bloodline, which in the Arabic is represented as the sultan, which is the royal bloodline. In Hebrew, the relationship between the royal bloodline and the angelic bloodline is malach, which is an angel, and melech, a king. As we said earlier, malach is also a sailor, so this would be rendered into English as kingship. So these factors, the symbol of the angel himself can also be represented as a serpent, a personification of the angelic bloodline.